Perfect.
Nice, great turnout again today. Yeah, we'll give it just a couple more minutes, guys. I close the door. I hear my daughter singing in the background. Cool, great turnout, guys. Nice, and we're at 11:03, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. So first off, thank you guys so much for all of your hard work. I kind of ruined the surprise last night with my email because I very much alluded to it, but we've hit 1,400 papers in 6 days. So I think we need lots of applause and clapping and amazingness for you guys. That's awesome. So 14, yeah, so 14, I think it's 1411, Johnson, correct me, 1,411 papers were reviewed, and from that, I think it was 79 papers that were extracted, maybe it's 87. A lot of papers have been extracted, a lot of data have come out. There's over 3,000 patients that have data extracted, and somewhere around, oh, Johnson, were you gonna give me an update on that number?
Yeah, sorry, I had some audio issues, so I couldn't hear anything. Which update, or did you want just general numbers?
Yeah, maybe just general numbers, because I was giving wrong numbers, I'm sure. So
Okay.
maybe give us the right numbers on pages, papers, patients.
Perfect. So I didn't pull the number of patients. I can pull that right now. But as of this morning, before our early morning meetings today, we had 1,434 reviewed articles. That was about an hour and a half ago, so the number might have changed a little. There were 91 extracted articles. So that's a lot more than we had yesterday. You guys went through 638 reviewed articles in the last 24 hours and then added another 30. So that's a lot of pages and a lot of articles to go through. Looking at the sum on the spreadsheet right now, it looks like there's 3,697 patients from the patient number. So lots of good numbers coming through,
Yeah.
guys. So
That's awesome. Yeah, way to go. Thanks so much, Johnson. Also, so we also have looked briefly at the unique treatments, and there's somewhere between 50 and 100. We have to. I know it's a big range. We have to really start to pull these down because there's a lot of repeats of the same drugs, but somewhere between 50 and 100 different drugs and or herbs that would not be considered pharmaceuticals that have been used. It's probably going to be somewhere between 25 and 50 actual pharmaceutical products that that have been used in this cohort of 3,000 plus patients. So it's great. I think that an analogy that I've been thinking about a bit recently, and was chatting with my sister about actually, was this concept that when you if you're in some sort of a battle and you've got your front lines that are taking on an enemy, they've got certain weapons or ammunition that they're using. It's really helpful for the next wave of people fighting to know what actually worked in the front lines. And so I think that what you guys are kind of doing in a way, and of course there's probably a lot better analogies than this, but I think that what you guys are doing is you're capturing data on the things that were tried on the front lines when people just didn't know what else to try. And we're going to try to synthesize that so this next wave of physicians, many of your colleagues, are going to be able to use that information to say, okay, this is what was used before. These are the things that seem to be working better or worse than other things. So big push to get to where we are. And Johnson and I wanted to share some kind of plans for the next few days and where we want to go from here. Um, well, I guess first off, I should share our goal for this. I mean, as you guys know, we wanted to get through all these papers, make them freely available. As you guys know, they are freely available. Anyone can look at the data online, which is wonderful, and it's going to obviously stay that way. Another goal, something that we've kind of midway decided to do, is that Sheila from our team, who some of you guys would have seen from a previous one of these meetings, Sheila is going to lead in an attempt to analyze all of these data, and to really attempt to pull this all together into a picture, which Sheila has incredible experience in this kind of work in Castleman disease, and I have no doubt that we'll be able to get some good insights from the COVID data. So with that in mind, we're going to be pulling it together, analyzing it, putting together a report, and then trying to get that out to the world. So in thinking about trying to synthesize what the work that's been done, it's really important before we start crunching any numbers to make sure we feel really, really good about every data point that's been entered. And it's been a real Herculean effort to get to where we are right now. And so Johnson and I have worked through what we think is a helpful quality assurance plan. And that's where basically, so far, the 80 plus papers have been reviewed by someone. We would like to have every single paper that's been extracted to be re-reviewed, and basically each data point that's in the database to be re-reviewed by someone else. And what we've initially said that would kind of be been every one plan, but I think something that would help us from just like a pure publication quality assurance perspective is to limit this second pass, the re-review, just to the physicians that are on this crew and the medical students that are on this crew. I think that enables you to feel confident that every single case and every paper was reviewed by at least one physician or a medical student. And I think that obviously the hard work's been done by this kind of citizen scientist army. And this is in no way to say that our citizen scientists, which are many of you guys, I think we have more citizen scientists than we do have MDs or medical students. But it's been really critical to get this in there. But I think that it makes sense now as a second pass to have medical students and physicians that are part of this team do the audit. And that's not to review the cases that didn't get extracted. This is just focusing on the extracted cases, which is, Johnson, I keep getting the number wrong. Is it 87 or 89 papers?
91.
91 papers have been extracted. So thinking about that, I think there are about 15 physicians and medical students, maybe a little bit more than that are part of our group. And so we'd like for that group of 15 or so to call out, pick out out of your 90, to put your initials next to it for a full re-review. So you'll treat it as though it's a new paper for you. And then you will go through it. And if you find any discrepancies in that document between what's in the database and what you would have put into the database, we want you to put that discrepancy into Slack and to tag Johnson, and we'll try to resolve any discrepancies. And so and Johnson's put together a great protocol that I will definitely share the link with you guys afterwards on those steps. But so basically the MD students and physicians will do this round of re-review of the 91 papers. In parallel, I know this is a bit of like moving the goal line a little bit back, but you guys may be aware that there are these archive services online where papers that you've submitted to a journal, you can submit in parallel to these online pre-publication archive services. One's called bioRxiv, medRxiv, there's ChinaRxiv. So these are the three biggest archive services. In total, there are about 1,000 COVID-19 papers in these three archives. And so considering kind of the incredible work you guys have done, especially just over the last 24 hours, what we would love to do, especially for the non-MD, non-physicians, to keep our momentum going, is to now turn to these archive databases. So these where these papers are, and many of those papers have already made it into PubMed. And so if they're in the archive service and they've already made it into PubMed, that means that we've already reviewed it. So there's no reason to re-review any old papers. But if they're in the archive service and they haven't yet been reviewed by our army of reviewers, then let's take it on just as though it's published. Of course, there are some limitations to archive in the sense that it hasn't gone through peer review. But we think that that it's unlikely that really material changes will be made over the course of peer review. So we think that it's worth doing this. And Johnson has actually separated it out in our spreadsheet. So that it's a separate sheet to put it into. So that way we have no worries about kind of contaminating the first set of data. So those are kind of the couple of things that we have as next steps. I guess I definitely want to open it up to questions, but I also want to see, Johnson, do you think that it makes sense to go through those protocols as a group, or do you think that sending out the link afterwards? What were you hoping to do, Johnson?
I was hoping to sort of just fly by the protocols. That way everyone has sort of an idea of what's going to happen. This will also help anyone who's more of a visual auditory learner, because they'll be able to see it happening. And then that way it's on here for all the people who aren't on this call right now, and they can see it later. So
that sounds great. So yeah, feel free, if you'd like, Johnson, to share your screen. Let me know if I need to pass anything to you. And then, and yeah, you could take us through that protocol.
Fantastic. So I hope you all can see my screen right now. I'm going to try to do it pretty fast so that we can serve your time as well. I'm going to speak mainly to the MDs and the med students right now, in that we'll go through the auditing spectrum really quickly. There's this new folder that I made in the Google Drive called Audited Paper PDFs. And let's bring up this protocol. It's almost exactly like what you were doing beforehand. You'll go into the big spreadsheet, go to the PubMed citation list. Any article that's been reviewed and extracted should have this yellow yes here. So you'll put your initials here next to it. With 91 papers and about 15 of you guys, we're asking you guys to do about 5 to 6 each. If you'd like to do more, you definitely can. Your goal is to do exactly what we have been doing. Take this PubMed ID, stick it into PubMed, download the PDF, review it as if you would review, and then find that PubMed ID on the big spreadsheet or the first tab of the spreadsheet that's PubMed extracted, and make sure you agree with every data point. If you don't agree with it and you think there's discrepancies and you want something changed, make a comment and then Slack it to us. Put it in the COVID Slack channel and then tag me on there. And then David and I will go through and check those systemically as well. So we'll make sure that everything's been checked optimally 2 or 3 times, just to make sure we have the right data and that everyone feels good about the data we're putting together there. So really quickly, any questions about auditing before we jump into the other 3? The other 3 are a little bit more detail oriented, so I want to take a little more time for those. No?
Just a quick question.
Yes, Casey.
So you said like 2 or 3 times. So is it that like each paper should get like 2 different like med students or physicians to like look at it essentially? So like we just sign up to like there's like 3 people doing it.
No, that's a great point. I could have been a little more clear about that. Thank you for bringing that up. So it'll be the first round, whoever entered it in the first time. It'll be the second round, whichever med student or MD looks at it. And then if there's discrepancies, then I'll look at it or David will look at it. So there'll be 2 to 3 people looking at every single article. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and so exactly. And so just to, I guess, confirm exactly what Johnson said, you will only need to look at, or the MD physicians, only one MD or physician will look at every paper, and even if an MD or physician entered it the first time around, still look at it a second time. This second round will, so if that makes sense, but just also don't review your paper. That would be the other thing to clarify.
I heard another voice. Does someone have another question before we move on?
Yeah, that was me. So you want us to re-annotate the PDF and upload the like second PDF, but then we're just confirming what they already have in the extracted data column?
Yes, ma'am.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of our way to make sure that you're not too biased by looking at the previous PDF, but at the same time, all that we really care is do you match the data to what's in the spreadsheet?
Okay.
Yep. Trying to avoid that
discrepancy. Seriously, even if it's the most subtle thing, bring it up, because we're going to do a really huge analysis that we want to do once. Obviously there'll be future analyses, but we want to do one main one now and want to make sure the data is as high quality as we can get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Johnson, just one more thing. The comment feature on the Excel document, that's okay to use. I've used that last time, but I just want to make sure that's good for communicating with you.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way so that we can see what the prior person put in, and then your comment as to what you think should be in there, and then we'll be able to reconcile that with the paper. That's probably the easiest way versus trying to like do something else. That also brings up a good, just like general point. A lot of you, when you guys have been slacking me or emailing me, you're apologizing about asking questions. Please ask these questions. That's what we're here for. We would love to answer your questions, so don't feel bad at all. If you think it's like really nitpicky and something small, still send it in. That way we're all on the same consensus point. Perfect.
Are you guys suggesting to, if there's questions or discrepancies that come up during the audit, that people write them down in the Slack channel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and comment in the spreadsheet and write them in the Slack channel, just so that way people can see the kinds of questions that are coming up. And if you enter data and you see a comment happen in Slack, it gets resolved and you're like, oh my gosh, I did it the different way. Like, please do either let us know or go in and start making changes, because we just want to make sure that this is as good of a database as possible.
Should there be one thread for auditing stuff? I just imagine it might get a little bit unwieldy.
It definitely could. Yeah, we can start a thread for. That's a great idea. We'll start one thread within COVID-19 for data audit.
Perfect. I can make that.
The other thing I was gonna ask is maybe if like when people are going through their particular papers, there were things, the way they interpreted maybe some of the data. I don't know if like tagging the person who did the original read on that.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
That way that calls their attention. Yeah, tag, and you should be able to figure out who it is based on the initials, but we can also help you if you have a hard time figuring out who the initial person was. Tag them, tag Johnson, put it in that thread. That's an awesome idea. And then we'll get to consensus. Basically, at the end of whatever you comment, we'll make sure like this is the final answer and that it's really clear.
If you look at the edit history on the on each box where the initials is, it says the full name as well.
Perfect. That's a great idea. That's a great point.
Perfect. Sorry, I'm taking notes while I say here, so that way I can make sure to add it to the protocol afterwards.
Can I just ask a quick question about like a lot of the articles that are in Chinese? I feel like there's been a lot of people that have been just looking at the abstract, and some people, like including myself, that have been like translating it in Google and trying to be very like conservative and analyzing it. I'm just kind of wondering how we want to go about that, because it might be like a completely new like breakdown of the data in the audit.
Yeah, that's a tough question. So if some people, I think the majority of people, if the full text is not available in English, I think the majority of people are not currently extracting, which I think is a really reasonable thing to do. I think that, Google Translate is good enough in some ways to at least, you could probably figure out the name of a drug from Google Translate, but I think it would be hard maybe to infer things like date of discharge. I don't know, you might correct me and say, actually, it's not that hard. What's your experience been? Has it been like, figuring out things like date of discharge, resolution of symptoms? Have you felt like Google Translate's been good enough to help with that?
I think that like it's been overall pretty good. I was just working on one right before we started the session today. And I think it had so the person ended up not being discharged. They just were sent to the ICU and no more data was collected. But otherwise, it had all the drugs very clearly labeled and which days they were started. And it was just a case report on one patient, but I thought it was enough information and valuable enough to input.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, for sure, getting the names of drugs and if you can impute that sort of stuff, I think is valuable. I guess the question I'm just trying to think about systematically, especially as we go to publish this, as I was envisioning kind of the flow chart of, we started all these papers, some number of them were not English language, so we excluded them. Some number of them didn't include drug repurposing, we excluded those. It may not be a bad, I guess the ones that we exclude for not being English language, we could say not English language and not able to basically get sufficient data to utilize it. The question I have is, does it make sense for you to be like put on the cases that, because there's brackets around ones that aren't English language, so it's fairly easy to figure out which ones are non-English language. Like, would you want to fly through the non-English language, and we could basically put in our methods that one data extractor just used Google Translate and went through non-English. I don't know how quickly you could do that, and if that's a reasonable thing to do. Would you have the time and interest to do that?
Yeah, Yeah, so I've actually been already kind of doing that this morning. Been looking at a few of the articles that were kind of like stopped after seeing that it was in Chinese, and just kind of like did my own looking into it and could extract some of them. So that's actually no problem whatsoever. And I'm overall being like very conservative, like not,
Right.
you know, jumping into things where it's not totally 100% clear.
Cool. So yeah, let's plan, Philip, if you don't mind, to continue to do that, and if you can keep us posted on whether you're able to like do the whole list, because we want it to be as like kind of uniform and systematic as possible. So let us know if you're able to do that for the whole list, or if there's someone else we need to pull in for some part of it.
And I've already talked to Johnson and sent him a few of the articles, both in Chinese and English, and told him about the things where I was like how I was extracting. So Johnson's on board with what I've been doing so far, or knows.
Yep.
Have you found many that are in Italian?
I've only seen the Chinese ones so far.
Okay. Cool.
There's
Perfect.
them in German as well.
Are there?
Yeah, I didn't really get a lot of access to these articles. They were mostly abstracts and I couldn't find a PDF, but I think most of them, their abstracts did not suggest drug repurposing or anything, so.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think that, yeah, let's try our best, and we'll just want to make sure that there's a clear column. I think we already have it, so that way we can be clear in that flow chart which ones got extracted because either it was in another language or unable to get a full text, versus the ones where we were actually able to do this, even if they were in another language. Cool, great questions, guys. Any other questions or comments related to entry and/or this auditing plan?
Perfect. Then we're going to move on. Pardon me. Let me drink some coffee. All right. So the first thing that we're going to look at is this bioarchive. There's a different page for every single protocol because it's going to be a little bit different for each one of these databases because the way that you're going to be able to get that information is slightly different. Bioarchive is the first one. It'll be, in my opinion, the easiest, because we were able to pull all of that citations for our 3 search terms and put them into the spreadsheet, much like PubMed. So if we look down here, we have our bioarchive citation list, and it's almost exactly like what we had for the PubMed one, except for the fact that they didn't give us like a PubMed identifier. They gave us it in MLA format, which is fine. What we're going to do is we're going to ask you guys to go into bioarchive, and we'll ask you to put this DOI number into there. And so every single one of these columns will have this sort of identifier number there. So please pick that, go into bioarchive, you'll search it. I've found that bioarchive can be a little slow sometimes, so just be patient with it, which is why I preloaded all of these, so it'll be a little faster. If you use that DOI number, you should go to 1, maybe 3 articles, and then just check the name. So this is the first one, COVID-19 vaccine candidates. I'm not sure if this will actually be helpful for us, but it's the first one that came up. So you'll click on that guy, and then you'll do the same thing, download your PDF, move forward, and then you'll put it into, we go back here, there's this extracted folder, and you'll do the same thing that you were doing for PubMed. bioarchive is nice because you can check sort of that first, the name of the article, you can copy paste it and then check it against the PubMed citation list. The titles can change slightly. So what I've been doing is searching the title and then also checking for the last name of the first author if there's anything that's sort of similar. So that'll work out best for you. bioarchive, if you have a paper, this is another paper that I looked at where it was published more than 2 weeks ago. They actually link the paper to it. So you'll be able to see if you ever see this now published, it'll give you a DOI. You can click on it and find that PubMed ID and just check to make sure that it's backtracked in. So bioarchive is the easiest because we've already pulled that information and I'll continue pulling the citations as we go along. The harder part then comes when we try to go to medRxiv. Let's see, can I move this? Okay, cool. So medRxiv, so can I do it? No, can't do it on the side, we'll do it here. So medRxiv, you're going to search our 3 cowords. So you'll put in, these are actually in the spreadsheet. So if you go to our medRxiv citation list, they're up here. So you don't have to write them in every time, you can just copy paste. So copy paste these in, to medRxiv, you'll do a search. medRxiv will not let us pull everything, and so it's going to be a little bit more difficult in that we'll want you to search it, put 75 items per page, and then order by oldest first. So we're going from oldest to newest so that we can have a pretty systematic way to go about it. You'll pull the information into this medRxiv citation list. They go up. I pulled this first one already. And the hard part for you guys is that you guys are going to have to see what the last inputted one is and then find it in medRxiv and go to the next one down. So it's not the best system. If you know of a way to make medRxiv work better, please let me know. David and I talked yesterday and we couldn't really figure something out. We spent a lot of time trying to figure it out. But for these, you'll put the first author, last name, first initial, paper title, and then the DOI that's listed here. So this will be the medRxiv DOI. Sometimes when you pull these names, they're going to come out a little wonky. And so a nice, easy way is click another cell, click this paint format tool, and it'll format it a little nicer so that we don't have formatting all over the place. And it'll make the spreadsheet a little bit easier for you guys to work with later. The best thing probably for you guys to do is when you find an article, put it on the sheet immediately before you actually start reading it so that you can claim that article. And we try to minimize the amount of times we have 2 or 3 people reading the same article if there are a lot of you doing this work simultaneously. So medRxiv will do the same thing. It looks almost exactly like bioRxiv because they're run by the same people. So you'll do the same thing. You'll download your PDF. You'll check it to the PubMed citation list, do the whole thing all over again. China Archive is a little bit harder because some people might look at this and go, it's a lot of Chinese. I do not read Chinese. The parts that we need are in English, so it'll be okay. We'll go to China Archive. You can Google it in. You'll click this advanced search option, and then you'll have to manually write these in. I couldn't figure out a way to get it to do it automatically, but you'll want to type in our 3 search terms. You're going to make sure that it's on title, and you're going to make sure that these put or. There's options you can do and or not, so make sure it's or so that we capture all of our COVID ones. We'll make sure that we'll put a display record to 100 and then this default. As long as we all have the same search terms and we're all doing it the same way, we should come up with the same articles and in the same order. And you'll press search. And China Archive is going to have a lot in Chinese. So you can focus on the ones in English right now, unless you want them to be translating, David.
I think that, I think that focus on the ones that you can download in English. Some of them, the title will be in Mandarin, but if you click on it, the full text is actually in English. So just click on it and see if the PDF is in English. We may do the same sort of thing where if we want to have one person systematically do a lot of Google Translate. I just think it's probably a lot of effort for everyone to try to translate.
Yeah. So like this one, we'll go with this first guy here.
Yeah, that third one's a great one.
Yeah, effective treatment of severe COVID-19 with tocilizumab, which is a drug we use for Castleman patients. So it's a great one that we'd like to put in. You'll do the same thing, download the PDF, and put it onto our citation list. This one, there we go. Our citation list. What I found is the easiest way to go about it is if you just copy and paste here, it'll actually hyperlink to the actual article itself. And so that'll make it a little bit easier for you guys going back forward and going back and forth. And it'll do the same thing, check against PubMed. A lot of it is going to be check against PubMed, make sure it's not there before you add it in, just to avoid overcounting these articles. And then everything will be about the same. In our protocol, I've written down how we'd like you to save these articles, especially if they're from our bioRxiv, medRxiv, or China Archive. And usually it's going to be which server you pulled it off of. So bioRxiv, medRxiv, China Archive, and then the DOI number after it, which is pretty similar to what we were doing with the PubMed. It just allows us to have this extra granularity as to where you pulled it. I know that was a lot of information that I just threw at you guys. So do you guys have any questions about the 3 sort of ways to go about it? There is a protocol that's written up. If you have questions about this protocol, please let me know. because we want to make it as systematic and easy for you guys to find these articles as possible.
Johnson, that was super helpful. I guess one thing I would mention, I think that it was helpful to go through this, is that these archives are really important for us to go through because there's data in there that are not yet published. And since this is like, sort of this whole front lines, let's do what we can as quickly as we can. That's why I think it makes sense to go through it. But I do suspect, or our plan for this first report and or paper will likely not include any of these archived papers. So there isn't the same sort of like day-to-day urgency, I would say, with these. I mean, it's urgent and important, but I do think that I would focus you guys' attention in parallel to doing this on making sure that we get through, the re-review of all of our papers from PubMed. And also, if you entered some of the first like 20 or so papers, we've changed some rules along the way, and we've actually added and changed data. So if you were one of the people who did, or basically if you entered any patients in, maybe just go back and look at your patients, make sure that according to the new rules, that everything is kind of in line, and also make sure that you did the PDF, that you were able to upload that, especially if you were one of the earlier patients where you may not have uploaded a PDF. So definitely make sure to go back, confirm all the data you put in, and then we'll have the physicians and medical students go back and do a review as well. I wanted to kick it over. Sorry, I didn't warn Sheila ahead of time, but I did want to kick it over to Sheila to see if she had anything she wanted to add or share with you guys, because Sheila is going to be our leader on the analysis of the data.
I don't think I have anything in particular to add. The thing that's most helpful is to try to be as systematic. Obviously, there's many people working on this, but trying to be as systematic as possible and filling things out as systematically as possible, especially within how we've kind of arranged that spreadsheet and what the answer options should be. So try to follow that. And if you filled out a paper, as David was just saying, if you filled out one of the papers earlier on, we changed some things as we went. And so if you filled out one of those earlier papers, maybe check back and see if you can kind of change your responses to match what we actually put in the header as the response options. Those kinds of things are helpful. I think one thing I've noticed in terms of the medications, some people are copying in the dosage or the frequency. That I would say you don't need to necessarily copy in. It's just the drug name is suitable. Trying to think of anything else I've noticed. I think and I think everybody has caught on to this, but we want to be able to say like what drugs were used for what population of patients. So if you're reviewing a paper, just make sure that you can actually tease out the number of patients that were in the study. So if it's just a case study, it's only going to be one patient, so make sure you fill that in. Or if it's a summary level study, if it's 100 patients, just put that in. And then the age and sex, or the breakdown of age and sex if it's more than one patient, or a summary level. So make sure you can just pull those in. And if you can't, then just flag it in that second listing of papers. And we can always go back to it if there's some type of information that we might be able to glean from it. That's all I can really think of, unless you think of anything else that's come up recently, David.
I don't think so. I think those are the key things. I think that we're really thrilled and grateful for the hard work you guys put in to get this data in place. Let's do basically a rapid review to get kind of everything quote unquote audited. Let's keep pushing forward on bioRxiv. Let's keep getting more and more data in. I think that we've got a really good plan. I mean, I think everyone has demonstrated their urgency. You guys have, raised your hands, and not only have you kind of raised your hands to get involved, you obviously, put in a tremendous amount of effort already. In our 5 or so minutes before we wrap up, I did want to just take an opportunity to have you guys share any observations that you've made, anything that you've learned through the process that you think is worthwhile. I mean, at this stage, this group of people, that we have in this call, maybe the only group of 30 people that have, fully looked at the whole COVID literature. And so interested to see if there's any observations you guys have made or comments you have from the process.
Yeah, can I jump in really quickly with
Sure.
one more granular thing that we are going to send out via email, but since most of you are on this call, we might as well have it here too. Column Z is day and disease course that COVID testing was negative. there are a lot of patients that are being tested multiple times. And so we just need you to put the earliest sustained negative response. And so you don't need to list out like day 7, day 24, day 32. Just put 7 if everything else is negative, because this will help us on an analysis standpoint afterwards.
And Johnson, a hypothetical, let's say it's negative on 7, positive on 9, negative 11, 13, and on, which happens because these tests aren't perfect. Yeah. Would you say that in that case, you wouldn't do the first one, you would do the first sustained, meaning that if there's a negative, a positive, negative, 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 go to that third test, which is the first sustained negative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think it was day 11 in your example, but that's what we want. And then in the notes for justification of timing resolution, you can put that granular detail as like negative, positive, negative 4 more times, because that's also important for us to know. But from an analysis standpoint, it'll be easier if there's just one number there versus a string. So thank you.
Yeah, I will say I did have an article that was like that, and the title was talking about, hey, to sustain negative response, and then 4 or 5 days later, he was transferred to a hospital. A different hospital had a positive response again, and they kind of did that back and forth. So that's kind of good to know. I did put in the text of that information.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Johnson, for saying that, because now I can go back and fix my information that I provided. That was good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rosie. Thanks, Johnson. Comments, observations that you guys have made over the course of this, either about the data, drugs, COVID-19, or this sort of like citizen scientist crowdsourcing effort that you guys have been a part of?
I guess one question I had, I guess everybody who's kind of reviewed articles, but I've seen most people have survived. Like I haven't seen many case reports of deaths. I had one that was from a Chinese article. That was 3 deaths, and the information on that was pretty bare. Johnson and I talked about that, but I just didn't know if anybody else had like seen any deaths in any of their case reports.
Yeah, my quick comment, I want to hear others' thoughts too, is that there's a few things at play. One is that especially when it's like a couple cases, usually doctors are biased towards wanting to publish successes as opposed to patients that don't make it. So I think that's one. I think another comment is that a lot of these reports were submitted while there were patients that were still in the ICU and that were still sick. So even though they were alive or survived at the end of the case report, that doesn't necessarily mean that they survived long term. And then I think the third piece is just the natural history of this disease, that thankfully a lot of people do survive COVID-19. I do think that we are enriched for people that are in the ICU and in the hospital. So you would expect that there would be actually a higher proportion of patients who don't survive. But I do think that these other confounders are at play as well. Other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that they're often just publishing cases, like doctors want to publish their successful cases more often. So I think it's just a bias in what's in the literature.
And
I had a case series where it was about 1,000 people and 15 people died in it, but there was no specific data on what happened per person or anything like that.
Yeah, from my review, it looks like it's the ones that we see patients die are ones like Aaron, where you have 1,000 patients and a proportion of them will die, or ones where they do postmortem autopsies and things like that, where they're specifically looking for like a cause of death.
Yeah.
Ruth Ann here. I also entered one paper where it was just one patient, and the patient, they said, did not respond to therapy and did pass away. So that is a case where it was one patient and it was reported.
Yeah, and were there any treatment efforts that were like kind of unusual, where they were trying something new that maybe hadn't typically been tried, or was it a fairly straightforward treatment?
This one was pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Ruth Ann.
Yeah, I had one. Wait, it was also like a big, like 10% of the 140 patients died, but they also mentioned that a bunch of them were transferred to the ICU, and then they like lost follow-up to all of the patients transferred to the ICU.
Yeah, so, I noticed that as well. I had a couple of things where which makes it difficult to kind of be in terms of accuracy when we're kind of going through all these like oh, he transferred this hospital, and you know, he's on his deathbed, but you know, didn't really die. So you can't.
That's a really important point. I don't know if you were able to make that note somewhere in the text, because that's a great point. If you're transferred to the ICU, you know, should that really, you know, they may not have made it. That's an important point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely when it comes to hospital transfers, like the case I was just talking about where they had a sustained negative and then another positive sample, like, I mean, luckily there was kind of communication between the two hospitals to like make that point. But that's one thing that I found just interesting, is just kind of the lack of follow-up and like how to get all this information to one area. Which, I mean, I guess that's our job, but also kind of difficult when, you know, just have hospitals and cases.
Yeah, it is difficult. It's something that you could imagine. I know we keep moving the goalposts back and adding more and more, but you could imagine in like a month or so, we could actually contact every author of every study and ask for like a survival follow-up on how individual patients live. And then you could kind of, you know, feel comfortable. That's a tremendous amount of additional work. And obviously we're not going to hear back from everyone, but we may hear back from some. And so that's something just to keep in mind, that could be, you know, a future wave as well, is, you know, how do these people do as far as survival goes? I'm interested to hear from you guys, what it's been like. I mean, I know that everyone is just totally, you know, so concerned about what's going on. We have friends that are treating patients right now. Some of us have friends that have coronavirus. What's it been like to do this project? I mean, any initial kind of feelings about, like, you know, joining this team or being a part of this project?
I mean, I'll speak and I say it's pretty rewarding work. I mean, it's a very urgent cause. So I think as like a pre-med student, like we don't really get to do many things that have an immediate impact. It's always kind of the idea of like looking 7 years down the road, really, before you kind of make any sort of impact. So it's kind of cool. I mean, this is something that, you know, people I know are affected by. I mean, I think everybody probably at this point knows at least one person who either has it or, you know, is treating it. I mean, my mom's reusing her mask at work. Like, patients and doctors are reusing their paper scrubs. So it's a pretty big deal to treat patients and kind of just, you know, be one person in the line of people that's trying to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Joe. Any other comments or thoughts related to just kind of like, I mean, obviously you guys have all done this, and so you've all put in a lot of time and you've prioritized it, which is amazing. Any other thoughts on why you've done it, or like, you know, what it's been like?
I mean, one thing for me is that I feel like in the media, and obviously it's kind of like with the political things that are going on right now, there seems to be not a whole lot of evidence or sustained evidence, and I think a lot of conjectures. And I think doing this project is important to me because I think I get a little bit frustrated when, you know, politicians, especially at the federal government level, are making claims that are reproduced in the media without like a strong evidence base behind them. And I think that, you know, then has ripple effects to, you know, people in our community. And so I feel good about being part of this project to hopefully provide a more solid quality evidence base to, you know, make some of those claims.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
Hey, David, it's Mileva. I was just going to say that I think at a time where everybody is feeling really helpless, it's been really great to be able to join in this initiative and do even a small portion of giving back, so that you're taking away a little bit of this helplessness and lack of hope for, you know, the outcome's going to be, and actually able to physically see and participate in something that could, you know, eventually change the course of what's going on right now in this pandemic. So I think it's been really great on a personal level, and also being the mother of somebody who's immunosuppressed, being able to, you know, join again in a different aspect of this fight and figuring out a way that we can help and contribute has been really great.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mileva, and I feel like such a connection to exactly what you said, where it's like, you feel helpless. You also have a condition that makes you kind of at risk, and on drugs that make you further at risk. And it feels really good to work with you guys on this. Cool. Anything else before we sign off? Any other closing thoughts?
Thanks for like steering this and getting this together. I mean, I second everybody else's kind of sentiment with this, where it seems like it's a productive way to like sort of channel your anxiety, and through that it, like, at least for me, kind of lowers it a little bit, because
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Alec. I feel the same way. It feels good for me to be able to be a part of this, and I'm glad that you guys are a part of it as well. So I think that we've got some good plans. This has been, I think it's been great to reconnect on this. We're closing in on this first phase. And so please, if you've entered any patients in, check back on your patients, make sure no new rules have changed how you would have entered. If you're part of the crew that's going to be doing a re-review, let's jump on it today, tomorrow, if possible, so that way, we can be looking at pulling this all together early next week and getting it out to the world in kind of a packaged form. If you're not part of that re-review group, feel free to start jumping on these archives. There's a lot more data out there that I think that it's valuable for us to get our hands on. As Joe said, it's kind of like a minute-to-minute, day-to-day situation. And if we can, make some more impact, and again, even if it's in a very small way, it makes me feel good that it's more than nothing. So I think we've got a decent plan. You guys know that you can turn to Johnson, myself, Sheila, with any questions. I think that it's all laid out in the protocol. But really just want to thank you guys for all the time that you've put in on such short notice. It's been really, really incredible to see. I mean, we were like tracking the spreadsheet yesterday and just totally blown away. So thanks so much for all the hard work you guys are doing.
Perfect. Can I jump in with
please.
a couple more granular things? As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, and I'm like, oh, these are things I should probably tell you guys. I'm going to be continuing to update the PubMed spreadsheet. So if you are not part of the group that's auditing, or if you want to like step away from auditing for a minute, check the PubMed citation list, because as the days go by, we'll continue to add things onto there. So you could start there. And then just another reminder to try to avoid blanks as much as possible. If there is something that could go in a cell, please put that in, whether it be a no, a not reported, or like a data point, because blanks are really hard to deal with afterwards, because we are not trying to read all these papers and try to figure out what that blank actually means, because it's so ambiguous. So if there's something that could be put in there, please put it in there. I'm scrolling through, there are a couple blinks in there. So if you have put things there, just kind of check to make sure you have things there. So that'll be great. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Johnson. Yeah, as Johnson said, we're going to keep posting PubMed articles, and yeah, we want to get a report out early next week, but like we would love for you guys to continue to take them on, and let's keep generating more data. We haven't been all that proactive with sharing the spreadsheet, saying like, check this out, because I think we do want to get all of our data, be confident in all of our data before we start telling the whole world to look at the spreadsheet. But the idea is that if you and others want to help to continue to update things even after this initial push, we would absolutely love that, and want to stay connected with everyone, and hopefully continue to make progress.
Cool. Up on that, Johnson. So like there were some papers I couldn't access. Just there was I think microbe infections or something. There were some journals that I couldn't access. So for that, do you want us to just put no for drug repurposing, or not record?
For that one, for cases like that, make a comment on the type of paper column that just says like article is inaccessible or something, because then I'll get a notification because I own the spreadsheet, and we'll start looking into that. And then put no for reviewed and across, and we'll know that any row that has no's all across means that it's not accessible in some way, and we need to look back at that. So that'll probably be the best way to go about it. Thank you for asking.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, let's have a great rest of our days. Keep fighting this fight, and feel free to reach out with anything on your minds. Go team. Thanks, guys.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan. See you guys later then.
See you. Bye, Maleva.